Going live. There it is. Finally. Okay. Wow. That's that was an adventure. Hey everybody. How the heck are you today? Welcome to the ultimate professional in live streaming. Come to Dottotech to learn how to do live streaming because we've got it handled. Oh, that is a humbling experience. Second week in a row, though, we've had some technical issues. Going to have a chat with our friends at Restream and find out what the heck is going on. This was not cool. April, I think you can come back in now. Let me just share with you the link in case it has changed, because I won't even get into the details of what happened. But it was quite the adventure. All right, so here's what's happening today, folks. Sorry, we're like 7 minutes into the most fascinating live stream in the history of live streams. This is the ultimate final installment in our series of webinars on productivity, on the ultimate productivity solution. We're going to be talking today about Kanban. And I've got a special guest, Scott, who I don't know if he can get back in or not. I don't know if he's going to make it back in. He will for the Q&A. I will make sure that he jumps into the chat and then into the Q&A, but I'm not going to send him an email right now with the new login information. Instead, we'll get us to the video if the video indeed is going to play properly. Oh, there's April. So let's bring April in as well. Hey, April.
Hey, buddy. How you doing? Good. How are you doing?
Was that fun?
It's always fun.
Oh yes. My gosh. Oh my gosh. That was so what happened was, as the video was playing, my entire screen froze. And in actually the video playback, I saw that while it was streaming, the video had frozen and we were all frozen and I couldn't get us out of it. So I re-entered the studio, but it kept just letting me watch what was happening, which was frustrating to see me not there, but it didn't let me actually in. So it was, so we'll have a chat with them a little bit later today. But we are good now. We are good now. I'm
awesome.
Perspiring a little bit.
You know what? You are always great at for plan B, C, D, F, G. So you're good.
Well, thank you for that. That makes me feel so much better. All right. So now we'll get Scott in a few minutes, but today we're going to be talking about Can't Beat Kanban. The title was a play on Don't Mess with the Zohan, but it didn't work, did it? Nobody but me got the play on words as I started Can't Beat Kanban. But this is the final installment. If you've been with us for the last month, you know that we've delivered webinars on doing a productivity audit, doing a time audit, calendar blocking, Pomodoro technique, where we focus on getting into the flow and getting into a zone of work in a kind of a Zen state, which I could definitely use right now. And today is the last of the series. And this is something that I'm quite passionate about. I love Kanban systems. It's basically a workflow management, but the essence of Kanban is it allows you to visually see the challenges, visually see the work that you have to do, and to move it through a visual process, which for so many of us, it tends to give us a sense of control and comfort on the projects that we're working on. So I've recorded a video on Kanban. Part of the video is our special guest from Simpletivity, who is Scott Friesen. I will make sure that he gets the link here while the video's running, and he will be here at the end for Q&A to answer your questions about Kanban. So I think that what I should do right now is we should just cross our fingers and see if the video is going to stream properly. And we will all see you folks on the other side of my exploration of Kanban. Part 4 in our series of webinars that are designed to take this first quarter of 2021 and give us some really serious productivity skills. We started things out 5 weeks ago when we took a look at doing a time audit. We took a look at how we spend our time on the computer, and we figured out a way to measure exactly where and how we spend our time, looking for places that we can offload tasks to others where we're not on crucial tasks. And also, one of the things that I learned, and that I imagine most of you who did a time audit learned, is how often we jump from task to task, never staying on a task long enough to really get into that flow state and concentrate and get a lot of work done. And I personally recognize that that was something that I really wanted to overcome. And the second webinar we did in this series, which is on time and calendar blocking, helps with that because it allows us to choose to focus on single tasks or on one purpose for blocks of time and organize our day more efficiently so that we get more work done. And even more importantly, we get better work done when we are actually in that state because we're focused on the task at hand. And we are just more efficient if we do time and calendar blocking. It's one of those things that just works. Then last week on Webinar Wednesday, we looked at the Pomodoro technique, which is a way to assign blocks of time into those calendar blocks to give us kind of active feedback of how we're doing and allow us to stay focused, kind of stay in the zone more because we are going to set a time frame up that we're going to work within. It gives us the discipline and it gives us the feedback we need to really buckle down and focus on the tasks at hand, with the goal being to get into that flow state, to get into a state of highly productive work. This week, it's Can't Beat Kanban. We are going to take a step back from all of the individual things that we do ourselves, and we're going to take a look at workflow and project management and how that fits in with all of the other pieces of the puzzle. We now know what we spend our time on, how to better organize the time that we spend to be more efficient, how to get into the flow state more efficiently, and how to discipline ourselves so that we stay focused on task. Now we're going to talk about actually defining what those tasks are. How do we go about looking at what we have to do on a daily basis or a weekly or monthly basis, and how can we create some organizational structure that allows us to apply all of these new skills we have in a proper form? So the Kanban is a workflow system, and I can't think of a better one myself. I know there are lots of other ways of doing things, but I got to tell you a quick personal story here to start things off, because I started with Kanban long before I ever knew I was starting with Kanban. Back when we were doing our TV shows, my partner on the TV show, a guy named Jeff Gorbelman, brought to us a system for our TV show that he had used at the CBC for years before, and I imagine many others have used it as well. I thought it was awesome when I first saw it, but now I realize that it's just a modification of Kanban. What it was we took index cards, the 3x5 inch index cards, and we wrote down everything that we had to produce in our TV season. We did 13 shows a season, we had multiple sponsors, and we had different segments and different types of segments that we did. We color-coded the cards and we wrote everything down. All of our sponsor responsibilities of demos we had to do, all of the features we wanted to do, all of the themes that we wanted, all of the breaks, everything was written down. And then we had corkboards put up around our entire office. And we had each of the shows with all of the cards in it. And I would sit there and stare at that board for hours and move a card from one place to another to create proper themes for our shows so there was a natural flow. We put times on the cards so we knew we had the right amount of time to time out the shows. It was a brilliant system, and it really, I always knew exactly where I was, even though we had multiple shows being taped at different times. I always knew from that visual representation of our season laid out on those corkboards, I always knew exactly where I was and what was expected of me at that time and what was coming up in the rest of the week. Now, I thought Jeff was some sort of incredible productivity and organizational television producing god because he had brought this wonderful system to me and exposed me to it. Now I recognize that it is merely a form of Kanban, which is what we're going to be talking about today. Jeff was still an awesome business partner and a terrific TV producer. So let's go through what we're going to cover today in today's webinar. I'm going to give you a bit more of an overview on Kanban. We're going to lay out the pieces so you can understand the pieces. And it's so simple. One of the beauties of Kanban is nothing is simpler than Kanban as far as putting it together, a workflow system. It can ultimately deal with very complex things, but the system itself, quite simple. I'm going to do a short demo. We'll show you how we set it up and concentrating on this visual process. All of the different tools that we use reflects the fact that Kanban is a visual system. You see what you have to do. You see time reflected on the page in front of you or in the cards in front of you. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the keys to Kanban, and we've got a treat for you. I did an interview with Scott Friesen, who is like the Trello god. Nobody knows more about Trello than Scott. Trello is one of the really famous Kanban apps. So Scott's going to talk to us about how the different things keys that you need to know in order to implement Kanban effectively, should you choose to do so. And then we'll spend a few minutes looking at some of the different apps. And there's a huge variety of apps, but we'll touch on some of the kind of the top and the most popular apps, ones that I think will be most popular for this community. So let us get into it. Kanban. Visual cards that list details about an item organized into lists on a board to manage workflow stages. What could be better? Let's do this. So what I want to do to start things off is I'm going to jump into Asana with you. This is my own Asana install, and I'm going to, with you, set up a Kanban board. I'm going to show you, and we're going to start from scratch with just a blank canvas so that we can see the pieces of the puzzle. What you see here in front of you is actually one of our projects that I work on here at Dottotech. It's Gray Matters. It's my podcast, and this is my Kanban board of all of the things related to my podcast. But let's start. Instead of we're taking a look at this and trying to deconstruct one, let's start a brand new project. Projects are what each board is kind of called within Trello. And we're going to start with a blank project so we can start at the very beginning. And when we start with a blank project within Trello, or within Asana, I imagine within Trello too, we have a chance to name it and then choose whether it's a list, because it's the task manager can also work as a list-based task manager, as a timeline, as a board, or as a calendar. A board is what we want because that's really the basis of Kanban. The pieces of Kanban, the main pieces of the system are, there's a board, then there are columns, and then there are cards, like our index cards. And the cards are the tasks, and they move through the columns on the board, and the columns on the board are stages of your project. It's as simple as that. And within the cards, you can have subtasks. You can have all sorts of other tasks. So you can see here, this is actually the simplest Kanban layout you can ask for. There's stuff that we want to do, stuff that we are doing, and stuff that is done. It's as simple as that. Are you disappointed? Were you expecting more? This is Kanban at its essence. So what we do is we create tasks, and the tasks are cards. Within Asana here, it pops out and we say this is the first thing we do. So the way it might work for me is let's say that it's for a podcast. Let's say you're creating a podcast or a blog or videos. So we're going to call this podcast 1, which would be a wonderful name. You can assign it to different people that are within your team. You can set due dates. You can do give all sorts of other meta information about whatever the task is or the card is, the item is that you're working on. Now, one thing about Kanban is I'm going to take a step back for a moment and talk about the difference between projects and tasks. Projects are your overall projects, and they consist of a series of tasks to get things done. One thing that you want to avoid is turning a whole project into a task. So learning what should be an entire project and learning what should be a task is something that you're going to have to pay attention to and learn and evolve as you go. So, but the way that I look at it, the overall podcast that we deliver is a project, and the individual episodes are tasks. Now, within those individual episodes, we have subtasks like record the podcast, editing the podcast, and publishing the podcast. I mean, at its simplest form, that's what we do when we create a podcast. So now we've created this, and we can, as I say, we can set a due date for it. Now, once we've done that, it's identified here as a card, and we can go in and we can look at details at any point within it. But this is a Kanban card now, as far as I'm concerned. One of the nice things about Asana, and I'm sure the other apps will do this as well, is allow us to duplicate the task, and it'll duplicate all of the subtasks within the task. So I can make this podcast 2. And then I'm going to create another one, which will be, you guessed it. Oh, say it with me. It'll be podcast 3. And I just want to have 3 so I can show you the process of working our way through. All right. Create that as a task. There we go. So now we've got these 3 podcasts ready to go. And let's say that I am now ready to start working on the first podcast. All we do, it's so satisfying. Click on it, drag it across, and now it's in our in progress. So I know when I take a look at Asana that this in progress is what I should be working on right now. And then I can go into the task and I can say, oh, I have to record it. Once the recording is done, I can check it off. Once the editing is done, I can check it off. And once the publishing is done, I can check that off. And at that point there, I can say this entire project is complete, and it will actually change and it will gray out when you have more, like if you have a header image for the project and stuff, which I'll show you over in my own real podcast software, it will actually give you a visual representation there. But do you see what's happening here? I have a visual representation of what's coming up, what's been done, and once it's complete, I can put it over to complete. Now you can add more columns here as there are more detailed stages of any project you work from. But essentially speaking, this layout here is exactly what a Kanban board is. Now, what does this look like in the real world? Let's go back to that board that I was just sharing with you, which is our Gray Matters board. And there, I've got a couple of extra items. And this is just set up the way that it works for me. Everybody's going to set up their own. I set up templates. I have a column of templates so that I can always quickly duplicate the process, because if I open up the template, you'll see that we have all of these subtasks within the template of what we do, of creating a theme mail, writing the episode description, recording all of the elements, packaging it up, editing and outputting it, writing a blog post, uploading it, scheduling it, and creating the social. So I have all of those different tasks that are included every time we create a podcast. So it's much easier than me entering those each time, is just duplicating from the template every time. And then just because I added a header image. You can actually add a simple header image to the tasks, and it can be different types of graphics, which will help identify things even more clearly. I think we do have some of them over here. We actually have the thumbnail. Well, once we're into the archive here, which is post-production, we've actually replaced the thumbnail with the actual thumbnail of that podcast itself. So it's kind of a nice way to look at things. But I've set up one column here for templates, second for just ideas. This is my catch-all of any ideas that I can quickly convert into a podcast once the ideas have matured. Then I have pre-production, which is lining up the interviews, gathering the resources, starting to put together, for example, in the webinar one in my webinar Asana board, I'm gathering all of the different resources that I might be using to share in the shared note. And then there are the ones that are actually in production. Because we record it in pieces, sometimes I'll be doing an interview several weeks before the podcast is actually published. So there can be multiple ones in production at the same time. And then once the production is done, they move over into the archive column because they are complete. I can check them off as finished, and then I move them across as complete. And here is, where's actually this one here right now. Then and now, this one here is actually just completed as of this week. So I'm going to say that's completed now, and I will actually do along with you. I will move that from the production column to the top of the archive column, and now it's another one that's in our archives. Nice thing about having these archives is if there's any details or notes from previous podcasts, I can quickly go back and get the detail from looking here in the archive column. Now, while it seems incredibly simple on the surface, it can get really sophisticated how you put together your own individual system. And I use Kanban the way that I use it, and it's evolved over time. I mean, for a period of time, I was using it and I didn't even know it was Kanban. So I wanted to bring an expert in to tell us some of the best practices and the things that we should avoid doing. So let's have a listen to what Scott Friesen has to say about Kanban. I started off by asking Scott, what are the most common mistakes that people make when they're setting up their Kanban systems?
I think there's two primary ones that I see time and time again. Number one, not actually using the lists or the different stages, the different columns appropriately. And then number two is just using way too many stages or way too many steps when it comes to setting up their Kanban board. So, the first one, when someone often is first introduced to something like Trello or Asana, and, many of our productivity and project management tools can allow a board view or a Kanban view of some kind. I see many, both individuals, but also teams, they start using those columns just as regular lists. and they don't have much of a relationship between them, right? They're just sort of stagnant. It's almost like they're having multiple to-do lists just on the same screen. And when I show them how they can sort of walk something through, right? Through a process from beginning to middle to end, and not that it has to meet or end up in every one of those stages, then sort of the light bulb goes off that, there's the power of sort of seeing where things are going to be happening. I'm behind here, I'm ahead here. This is where I should be putting my attention. And then the second one, as I mentioned, has to do with just having almost unlimited lists. And if you are using this on a digital tool, if you are using something like Trello, if you've got to scan a few pages to the right just to see the whole thing, that's maybe a hint that your board has gotten too big and too bulky. And in my, there's not really a magic number in terms of the number of stages or the number of steps, but ideally you'd like to see everything sort of on one screen or one snapshot so you can get that high level view, right? All of our software is going to give you the ability to add attachments, notes, due dates, all that good stuff. But one of the big powerful benefits of Kanban is getting that high level snapshot before you start digging into those tasks.
The one thing that I wonder about is when people are talking about that swim lane thing that goes through that where you kind of are is that just like for a fast track a product through, or something that or something that carries through all of the different stages?
Yeah, often swim lanes are used as sort of segmenting, you could say, segmenting out your tasks or your cards or whatever information you're using within your Trello board. Sometimes it can be a great way to segment things out by either department or a label or some other category that you choose. Instead of having it all bulked up into one list, you can sort of separate it out into multiple lists as well. Maybe it's resources, right? Maybe it is members that you're working with. So
if you're doing a bigger project where you have 3 people who have responsibilities for things, you could use the swim lanes to put each individual's responsibilities for that stage. Would that be a way of doing that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the way that I think of it is that it's almost more of just a visual benefit than anything else, right? It doesn't necessarily change your board or your way of working, but it makes it a little bit easier for members of the team to see, okay, project 1 versus project 2 and 3, for example, or like the one we just spoke about, maybe you have your 3 different colleagues or people that you're working with, and you can see them in sort of those different, not necessarily hierarchies, but just different lanes.
Okay, I thought that it was kind of, when I saw a swim lane, I was thinking it's some sort of a fast track. So you can see, obviously, I was completely off track with what I was thinking. I'm glad you put me back into the proper space as far as that goes. Do you typically, when people are starting out, start them with a single project, like within an organization? Do you because people are coming from some other task and project manager typically, do you try and do a full migration as people start, or do you try and take it kind of project by project?
It sort of depends on the state that their projects are in already, right? How either fleshed out they are. It might also depend on the types of tools that they are coming from. There's a few things that it's going to be easier to perhaps transition. The way I often like to look at it when it comes to my clients is that this is a great way to have a fresh start, right? And there's real value in that, right? There's real value in not just migrating over everything the way it is, but this is a fresh start. Something that a lot of people are surprised about when it comes to myself and my own personal productivity is that when I upgrade to a new phone, to a new smartphone, and I only do it roughly every 3 years. I'm not doing it annually, but I almost never use the transfer over feature. I actually use that as an opportunity to sort of start fresh and ask myself, okay, what apps do I want to actually continue using? Do I want to lay out a little bit differently here? This is my opportunity as a fresh start. So when it comes to your Kanban board, if you're coming to Kanban or transitioning to Kanban, I think that could be a great opportunity. You've got a fresh start, you've got a fresh slate to start clean. Do you need that many stages? Are your departments or your labels or your categories, are they still relevant in that way? So it can be a great sort of refresher as you're starting new within this system.
One question that I always have, and Mike Vardy and I have talked about this a fair bit, is should your system, like I know you're a proponent of Trello, which is an awesome system. Are you a proponent of people having a tool like Trello set up for Kanban for project management, and then having a personal task manager as well, or making sure that you just use a single system for all purposes?
I've sort of changed my opinion on this question over the years. As I strive to help people make their digital lives a lot more simple, as simplicity should suggest, I often encourage people to keep their software and their app toolbox relatively small, right? Fewer tabs that are open, fewer apps that you have to click on. However, different apps have different strengths and different weaknesses. And so I would hate to encourage someone or to force someone to stay within a particular box or within a particular app if it's just not going to do the things that that they want it to do or make their lives that much easier. So when it comes to Trello, again, in my opinion, an excellent project management tool. One of the nice things about Trello, I think, compared to many of its competitors, is that it's really easy for those who maybe don't have much experience in a project management tool. You can be up and running with something like Trello or many other Kanban style software in literally a matter of minutes. You don't have to send someone a full hour tutorial to get started within the system. It's very, very visual. But yeah, if you want to use Trello for certain projects, but maybe Asana or Monday.com or Notion or something like that works better for something else, then by all means. I think as long as you just have maybe a few either definitions as to what types of projects you're going to be using for what types of software.
Mm-hmm. And I think for people who are freelancers, quite often they've got to work within multiple environments. So they might have one client that uses ClickUp and another client that uses Basecamp. And so they've got to be flexible as far as that's concerned. Now, when you set up your Trello account, do you keep all of your personal stuff, all of your personal to-do and tasks in it as well? Or do you use a separate app?
So actually, as many of my followers may know, my primary to-do list happens to actually be my calendar. So I'm a big proponent, and I don't just mean time blocking. I know many people are familiar with time blocking and putting important things right on the calendar. But something that I have found most effective, very simple, but yet most effective, is actually using the all-day event area within any of our calendars. It doesn't matter if you're using Google Calendar, Outlook, or something else, is using that all-day event area for my most important tasks. Because number one, you can't get rid of it. Doesn't matter how far you scroll
it's haunting you
up
at
and
the
down.
top of the page all day.
It's there all the time. It stays up front. And the other benefit, which I find, is that seeing the relationship between those tasks and everything else that is on my plate. I find that too often, we get so locked into a tradition, what I call a traditional task manager, like maybe Todoist or Trello or something like that, but yet we don't have our calendar up at the same time. So we're making these decisions about what we should be doing, but then we forget that, oh yeah, I've got that half-day meeting tomorrow. There's no way you can do all this thing here. But if you don't have it on the screen in front of you at the same time, it's hard to make those decisions. So my primary task manager happens to be my calendar. But when it comes to projects, when it comes to actual projects themselves, that's where I'm using Trello day in, day out.
Yeah. What I've been actually saying through this entire sequence of webinars is there's no right way to do this. That we each have to figure out our own personal system that fits for us. And in your experience over time, you've realized that looking at the calendar, this was an opportunity for you to be reminded of what's really important. Other people use the app that we talked about last week on the show called Dayboard, which puts up every time you change tabs in your browser, it puts up your to-do list. They use different reminder systems that's going to tweak you. The bottom line is, it gives you the confidence to know that what has to be done, you're being informed about. Doesn't mean you're going to do it, but it allows you to relax and know that things aren't slipping through the cracks. And so you don't have to keep those open loops going in your mind. So you can concentrate much more on the work at hand.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like you said, it's a bit of trial and error, right? Finding out what works for you and what doesn't.
So when people start out with Trello and you're a consultant, at what point do they know that it's going to work for them? How long do they spend in the zone before they know that, okay, it's becoming second nature. Trello is going to be the tool that's going to carry the day for us?
Well, one of the funny things that I see happen all the time, and I've actually started recommending this to teams who are brand new to Trello, or they have perhaps components of their team who are going to be coming on board to Trello, is I encourage them to get a little creative and have a little fun with Trello. In fact, encourage members of your team to try Trello out for something that maybe like a home repair project, or maybe they're planning a family vacation or something along those lines. Because if you're doing something sort of creative, something that you're really passionate about, and hopefully we're passionate about our work and our business as well. But if you do it for something else, I find that a lot of people often adapt to it a bit quicker, and you'll also get other champions involved as well. So if you happen to be someone who, you feel strongly about the tool, and this probably goes for other pieces of software as well, but if you can get other champions and get that light bulb switched on, that can go an awful long way. I think where Trello in some ways, revolutionized this idea of a visual project map. And I don't want to give all the credit to Trello. We're really talking about Kanban, which is much older, much older than Trello. But Trello was maybe the first one to maybe bring it to the masses.
It was popularized it for sure. Yeah.
In a digital format. And so I think people, coming from something like Microsoft Project, for example, or coming from an Excel spreadsheet, Trello or Kanban is just a breath of fresh air. And often it might only take a few days for people. I like this. I like being able to just drag something over. I like getting to just seeing the headlines of my cards, but yet I can dive in deeper with my attachments and everything else that I want to include there. I know an awful lot of marketing teams, anyone who's putting together perhaps a social media campaign, they love Trello because of the visual aspect, right? You can have images on the front of the cards and that type of thing. So I think just being a little more tangible, breaking out of all those rows and columns that we're so used to in a traditional spreadsheet, that's often where a lot of people get on board.
Two aspects. Visual gives you a sense of control. And progressing through a system that you can see gives you a sense of accomplishment, which I think is ever so important as well. And that's one of the things that I like most about Kanban is seeing the tasks migrating through. And with a traditional checklist, once you've checked it off, quite often it'll disappear. So you don't have that sense of satisfaction that I've done that. Whereas the card sitting there grayed out saying it's been done, it's been taken care of. That's good.
I see so many people get excited about what are we going to call the last column? Is it done? Is it complete? Is it finished? Is it hooray? What are we going to name that last one? Because people get a lot of kick out of getting it all the way over to the right-hand side.
Now, this video is going on a little bit longer than my normal one. So instead of me sharing all of the tools that we have found relating to Kanban and the other resources, the shared note, which we'll be sending you immediately afterwards, has a list and links to all of the software that supports the Kanban system, as well as some great guides that I found online to get you started, to teach you the principles of Kanban. And there are some indeed wonderful guides and tutorials out there, not to mention the terrific resources that you're going to find at Simpletivity, which is Scott's site, which we'll also be linking to here now. So let's get back and let's jump into questions and answers right now. So I am back. There was good active chat. It's the first time, I think, April will have to correct me. It's the first time since we've been doing Webinar Wednesday as a live stream that we've had to ban someone for coming on. And I would have thought somebody would be trolling us or being insulting, but no, the guy was saying, can I have some work? But that was great. I felt so powerful blocking him. It was just great. Let me bring on, April's going to be working in the back room for the rest of the show, because we're going to bring Scott in, who is now intimidating me because I realize that my community thinks you have a better voice for radio than I do.
I've been enjoying the comments that have been coming in, and I wanted to ask everybody if you have any web development projects for me. No. I won't go.
And we are now. I'm just kidding. See, I can do that.
Hey, now everything is working smoothly.
Yes. Yeah. Oh man, we had an adventure coming in. It was a good. Well, thanks for spending the time with us, Scott. I wish we could have introduced you to the community before, but the way things worked, it was a great conversation. So here's the deal. I'll just do a little bit of business, and then we'll spend the rest of the hour. How much time we got? Yeah, we got like 20 minutes, and we will answer as many questions as we can. Are you up for that?
Sounds great. I'm here.
Okay. So I didn't, off the top of the show, thank all of our patrons at Patreon, which this Dottotech is a community-funded channel. We're supported through the generosity of our community, our patrons, through the crowdfunding site Patreon. If you visit patreon.com/Dottotech, you can see exactly what's involved in supporting us. But basically, people step up to the plate and they say, Steve, we value these free trainings that you do each and every week, and we like to support you. And so at $10 a month, people get obviously they support our continued ventures here of creating tutorial content such as you're enjoying right now. But the biggest key for our patrons is each one of these webinars we make public for a week, but then we archive them in our Patreon archives, Webinar Wednesday archives. So all of our patrons have access to, this is our 162nd webinar tutorial on a variety of topics, from online marketing to content creation to productivity. So I want to do a big shout out and thanks to all of our patrons. Any of you considering becoming a patron, I think that is a great decision for you to make. And just before we jump into and answer all of the questions coming up, next week, we're going to take a little bit of a holiday from productivity, and we are going to share with you a beginner's guide to podcasting. Podcasting has exploded, my friends, since the beginning of the pandemic. The number of podcasts that are being published has practically doubled, but still, it's a fraction of the number of YouTube channels or blogs that there are. There's tremendous opportunity in podcasting. We're seeing a growth in online audio. Certainly all of the furor around Clubhouse has got people re-engaging and interested in it. So we're going to talk about why you should be considering podcasting, looking at the state of what's happening online with podcasting, and also give you some great tips if you are interested in exploring starting a podcast yourself. So that'll be next week. Check your email for the registration links. All right, Scott, let me go across here. Oh, are you pumped? Are you pumped for the questions?
I'm ready. You know, a first one that I've enjoyed seeing in the comments over the course of today's webinar so far is the pronunciation.
I knew you were going to go there.
Because people have been talking about it, as you've been saying. We talked a little bit about this earlier in the week, and yes, you know, the word originates from Japan. So Kanban is I used to say Kanban myself, even when I first started out with Trello, but I think that is more of a westernized version of the word. Kanban would be the most appropriate.
So some people will disagree. If you disagree, go ahead, but let's not talk about it anymore. We're going to say Kanban. We're going to go with that, and we're going to stay with it, and we're going to be happy with our decision to do it. And by the way, before we even did this, I received an email. I think whoever did it was on, and they did a phonetic explanation. They spent time in Japan as an English teacher in their youth. They spent many years living in Japan, became fluent, and gave me a great explanation of the phonetic pronunciation, which is who I'm going to trust as far as and you. So there we go. All right. So we will leave it as that. You know what Paul said? Paul actually asked a question which I thought about as I was doing it. When I was showing my little demo of Kanban, he said, wouldn't podcast one be a project and the subtasks be tasks within the project? That's a decision that you have to make, right? There's no right and wrong way to do that, is there?
And then I think that's one of the beauties of, you know, a board view or a Kanban board view is what does it actually represent? For many people, a single board may be the project, and then your individual cards may be the actual tasks themselves. However, and for someone else's workflow or someone else's business, each of those cards, like in your example, each podcasting episode is its own project, right? And that can represent it as well. So yeah, high level, low level, depending on what works best for you. And usually what it comes down to is how much information you're going to be storing or actively working on. When someone opens up their Kanban board to me and they only have like 4 or 5 things in there, maybe they need to break that out a little bit more so their subtasks are a little more visible and so forth. But yeah, very flexible in that way.
I'll bring it home. If I was doing a radio documentary or a drama or a comedy or some sort of a feature, I would make the single episode an entire project. Like in the different elements, it would be tasks. But when you have a serial offering, like a weekly podcast that you publish each and every week, because you know the processes, it's you don't, it's not complicated to know that it has to be edited by a certain day, it has to be uploaded by a certain day, and you need to have the graphics done by a certain day. So then having the card with the subtasks of those repetitive tasks is, I think, the best way to go. So go ahead.
And you showed a great example of that, as you were copying those cards, right? Because like you said, it's serial, it's repetitive. You've got some of the exact same tasks that you're doing week in, week out. So that's an ideal example, making use of copying or repeating those types of tasks.
Good stuff. Jeanette is asking, can this be used with ClickUp? There's a lot of questions about ClickUp. It's the new darling kind of to-do task manager. And can it be used with ClickUp?
I'm somewhat embarrassed to say, because you're absolutely right. ClickUp, I would say Notion, those two in particular, over the last 2 or 3 years, have certainly got an awful lot of traction. I have not spent enough time with ClickUp. I believe ClickUp does give you that view. I think most, very similar to Notion, very similar to Monday.com. I mean, if you really want to make a presence in the productivity world, you better at the very least have some type of board view. So I'd be interested to know. I know we have a number of ClickUp users who mention things in the comment today. They can correct me if I'm wrong, if they don't have a board view, but I assume that they would include that as a part of their feature set.
It does have a board view. I will verify that. So you can do it. I actually think it's tougher to do it in Notion than it is in the others, because Notion, you kind of have to build it yourself. You kind of have to figure out your system yourself. Whereas most of it, like Trello, Asana, and even ClickUp, it does it kind of by rote. It's built into the package. NY Stone Simple is asking, do you offer offline training on Trello?
So I do. I included a link in the comments, and I believe Steve will include one here in the replay as well. I do provide consulting both for individuals and for those who are using Trello as a part of a team. You can find out more at simpletivity.com.
And Atlas Society is asking along that same vein, what platforms do you recommend if you want to try a Kanban tool? I think you would heartily recommend they try with Trello.
Well, and just so you don't think I'm being biased about this, because I actually don't. A lot of people are surprised. I do not have any direct affiliation with Trello themselves. I have a good relationship with them. I speak with their development team and community manager, but actually I have no affiliate links or anything along those lines. I want to give my customers and my clients full honesty, whether Trello is the right tool for them or not. But this is what I will say. Because we're talking about a lot of different apps. Asana, it took Asana a number of years before they introduced a board view. One of the reasons, if you're just starting out with Kanban, why I would recommend Trello is that Trello was one of the first to sort of bring it to the masses, right? Trello was Kanban first, and only recently have they introduced some other views. When we're looking at you mentioned Notion, we took a look at an example in Asana. Not that there's anything wrong with them, but usually it was a secondary thought, or we're going to add this to it. And I just still find that Trello is the most intuitive. So if you're trying it out, you want to give it a whirl, Trello is probably still your best bet.
Stephanie is asking, does Asana let you, we'll jump over to Asana, let you see the tasks on each card without having to open the card? I like seeing all of the tasks I have as an option. I don't think so. I don't think there's a view option. You'd have to view it as a list.
That's right. That's right. So I guess the nice thing there is that each of those, like in your example, podcasting 1, 2, and 3, those would be treated as a task, right? Like in a task view. So if you looked at all of your tasks that were assigned to you, or depending on due date and so forth, you might have to drill down a little bit deeper for the subtasks, right? Yeah. That's where you probably have to drill down deeper, but at least at the initial level, you could view that in a list view.
Will Trello give you optional views on the card of the board on the card itself, allow you to see the subtasks within a card, like at just first level?
Yeah. So what Trello uses, they use the term checklist instead of subtasks. Now, there's a bunch of other third-party apps and what Trello calls power-ups that you can add to give it some additional functionality. But out of the box, Trello does have what they call checklists. So many people use them for subtasks. Some people just use them as an additional list, depending on what that card represents. So you do have an option if you are a Trello user. There's a place called Home, where you can actually get a summary of all of your checklist items, things that are assigned to you across multiple boards. And I know that was a question with some other users in the comments. Hey, if I'm managing multiple boards, whether it's Asana, Trello, or otherwise, where can I see everything? And in most cases, there's a place where you can get all of that information, even if it's managed over multiple projects.
John's asking, is there a recommended limit to the columns?
Yeah, this is a tough one. And I have seen boards, no joke, that are 27, 39, 40 steps or 40 stages. You're just scrolling, right? You're just scrolling all the way over to the right. I think one of the things that you should consider is if you're working on a full-size monitor, which I imagine most of us are doing the bulk of our work on a full-size monitor, even if it's just a smaller laptop, I would consider that a monitor type screen. Is things that you have to scroll to the right often get either neglected, they often get forgotten, and they almost die, right? If you don't see it there in front of you. And I think one of the great benefits of a Kanban board is getting that snapshot view, right? Like to be able to open it up in just a few seconds. Okay, where am I at? Where are things going? What do I need to do next? And so if you have so many columns, if you have so many lists that stretch out to the right that you can't really get that overall view, maybe we want to tear back a bit. A couple of things that you can think about is if you're using things such as labels, for example, which is a pretty standard feature with any Kanban board application, those can represent almost like micro stages or micro steps within the same list. You don't always have to be moving every single change over to the next thing. There might be a subtask or a checklist or other things that are happening as a part of it. You just want to identify what are the key stages, right? What are the key steps, and maybe start with that. So, I hate to put a magic number on anybody, but if you start to get into the double digits, if you're starting to look at like 10 plus, you might want to ask yourself, can any of these either be merged or be brought together?
And while you're talking about it, while you're mentioning, identifying things as you go along, I think we always have to come back to, for me, and maybe it's because of the way that I was introduced with it in the physical form on the corkboard, is recognizing that this is an incredibly visual medium. And so everything you do, you want to have in front of your eyes at a time so that you can understand the complete picture. And so limiting the columns is, I think, a great idea, kind of keeping it to your screen, but also then looking at the other features that are built into the application that you can use to help you identify things even more, such as using colors effectively on your different tasks and that sort of thing, so that you can color code things. And if you can color code it across your other applications too, I mean, you're a rock star. But looking in and choosing to use those things. I mean, even just using the thumbnail images that I use for my podcast, for my header image, with the final podcast that it's going to be. So I see the podcast number, I see the title in the thing. It just adds to my sense of satisfaction, but also my comprehension as to where I am.
Well, and the great thing about colors, labels, categories, whatever you choose to sort of segment out your work, not only is it very visual, but most applications will allow you to filter by those same categories and labels. So, many times I'll have someone come to me and the problem is that their Trello board is overrun. They've got too many things staring back at them. And I show them, well, listen, if you only want to focus on a particular department, let's say some of the labels refer to departments, we can just work in that mode. You can hide everything else and just focus on those things. Hey, you want to just see the things that are due in the next 48 hours? let's just get rid of everything else and just focus on those things. So even if you have a large number of projects or cards or whatever those tasks represent, you can often filter it down. And yeah, labels, categories, great way of doing so.
Like having multiple calendars in Google Calendars. You turn off everything but your personal calendar so you don't see all the work stuff. So you see what you have to, what's important there. Let's stay on this kind of how Kanban can help with information overload. Julia's asking, I use Trello and I do create lots of different lists within one board. Otherwise, I fear I would have too many boards. How do you manage scheduling and prioritizing across multiple boards? Because I think you're a fan of creating lots and lots of boards, right?
I'm somewhat in the middle. I usually need to have a pretty specific purpose to create a new board. I think that's one of the fallacies, I guess you could say, that we often fall into when it comes to productivity technology. It doesn't cost us anything to create a new project, a new label, and that type of thing. But that's a fantastic question. When it comes to Trello specifically, really one of their Achilles heels is that it was really tough historically to see where you were at without physically having to jump between those boards, right? It was hard to see a higher level view. Now, the good news is that just earlier this year, in fact, this is quite new, Trello has introduced several new ways of looking at your data, including different timelines, a table view where you can actually bring in information from multiple boards. And it doesn't have to be all of your boards either. Maybe you've just got 3 key boards and you want to see that all on the same screen. So Trello has actually made it a lot easier for you to do so. Here's another quick tip that I often give people. It's been there all along. If you click your profile picture in the top right-hand corner of Trello and then select cards, it's going to show you all the cards that are assigned to you across all of your boards. Now, the key is it has to be cards that are assigned to you. So if you only use Trello for personal, you probably don't have many, if any, that are assigned to you. But if you are working with a team, that can be a really helpful way of getting that view.
You've introduced the idea of using it as a solo tool. So one question that people are, Jerry's asked, what's your suggestion for single users?
Yeah, I mean, for single users, it can be an excellent brainstorming tool. For example, I'm just in the process of revising one of my courses that I provide a few times throughout the year. And I've started with Trello, sort of breaking up my columns into the things that I like, I don't like, and then that's going to branch out to actually executing on those tasks. But the nice thing, because most Kanban boards are drag and drop, it's just very easy to visualize, as we've said already. It can be great to brainstorm that information. I remember, no joke, before I was introduced to Trello, a little over a decade ago, I would sometimes pull up a blank PowerPoint presentation and I would give each slide a name, like just a title, so that I could go into the full grid view where you can see all of your slides, and I would start to reorder things around. And this was sort of my project planning. Instead of using Post-it notes, on the wall, little did I know I was kind of doing an ad hoc Kanban board using a tool that's certainly not designed for that, but using PowerPoint in order to do that. So Trello can be fantastic for brainstorming on your own. The other thing that I will use, this is a bit of I wouldn't say it's a hack, but it's an additional use of the comment field, whether it's Asana, whether it's Trello, whether it's elsewhere. Even on my personal boards, I will often type in something into that comment field because it's all time stamped, right? Everything has a time and date stamped on it. So if I'm working on a project, I can say, yeah, I completed such and such. I don't have to add the date manually. It's added there for me. I can go back and see the history. When did that client get back to me? If I'm using it from a sales pipeline or almost like a CRM type of use, it's all there. So the comment field, even if you're not collaborating with anyone else, can be a great way because of the timestamp feature.
Now, what you're hearing is me years ago with Evernote, whereas what Scott was doing was he's trying to do everything in the app that he knows best, and I did that for a long time as well in Evernote. We are going to be sharing with you in the note a pair of tools that I think has a lot of potential. It's called MindMeister and Meister Task. And MindMeister is a mind mapping tool, which allows you to kind of spitball and put things down and create relationships between different elements online. We're planning an upcoming webinar soon on mind mapping, and MindMeister is one of the better offerings. There's a lot of good ones, but the reason that I'm excited about it is that company has now released a Kanban tool called MeisterTask, which should work really nicely together, and I think is going to be worth exploring. I've always liked the energy and the way that they've been putting their stuff together, so I think that's going to be a potential contender as we move ahead. We have one last question, and that is: do you use Todoist at all?
Not as a key tool. No,
okay.
No.
Andy's asked, several people have asked that they've now added a board option to Todoist, and that might be a good solution. Especially, I don't think Todoist is a great team tool, but if you're looking for a single user tool, Todoist might be a nice option to look at as well. But I kind of agree with Scott. I think if I was looking for something simple and mature and elegant, Trello would probably be, you're never going to go wrong choosing Trello. You're always going to, it's going to do the job for you. It's not a gamble. It's a sure thing, as they say. Scott, this has been fun. Have you enjoyed it?
Hey, I've had a blast. It's great to see so many people in the comments. Thanks for all of your questions, and Steve, thanks so much for having me here today.
I appreciate it. Scott's information will be shared in our shared note. You can follow up with him, check out all of the different resources that he has on site, and the different courses and offerings that he has. And of course, his YouTube channel, especially if you're into Trello, his YouTube channel is, well, it's the one that we all go to when we have questions on Trello. Scott, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I will send you to the green room, and I will wrap things up. Thanks to April, who kept things together. Thanks to all of you for the great suggestions. As usual, the community asks so many intelligent questions and supports each other. It makes me smile each and every week that we deliver Webinar Wednesday. Sorry about the technical problems off the top. We will try and get those sorted for next week, but we will see. It's always an adventure. That's it. Next week coming up, podcasting. Keep your eye on your email for the shared note. Till next week. Have fun storming a castle.